Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV Charlamagne, the guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got Teslin Figaro here with us for this interview, and we got a special guest, Justin J. Pearson. Welcome, brother.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here with y'all.
Now, if people don't know who you are, Teslin Figaro, we talked about you in Front Page News a day ago. And Tez, you want to break it down for people that don't know what's happening before we jump right into it?
Absolutely. For those who have not been following the story, you may have heard of the Tennessee Three. Now, what happened with that is three Democrats in Tennessee, House Democrats, were protesting on the House floor. Jones, Pearson, and Gloria Johnson, Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and Gloria Johnson were three of the protesters that partaked in a protest at the State House advocating for gun control reform. They were there to call out the Republican leaders for not taking action following the mass shootings. Now, as a result of that protest, Mr. Pearson and Jones used a bullhorn during that protest, and they were sent to the floor to be expelled for their participation. Now, Gloria Johnson who was also white, was sent to the floor to be expelled as well. Now, as a result of that vote, Gloria Johnson was saved. She was able to keep her seat, but Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, who we have here with us today in the studio, was expelled due to the protests on the floor. So thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Pearson, and we just kind of want to hear from you.
Yeah, no, thank y'all so much for having me, for having us. District 86, glad to be here. Look, what we have in Tennessee is the erosion of our democracy. What we have is the perpetuation of systems undergirded by white supremacy and racism that are intended to divide us. And it should be of concern to everyone that democratically elected lawmakers can be expelled for doing a peaceful protest to end gun violence. And in black communities especially, we know what the effects of legislation that leads to the proliferation of guns do. We know what the effects of this are, and instead of actually addressing the issue, which started, and the reason we went to the floor was because there was 6 people killed in Nashville at the Covenant School, private school, 6 people. 3 of them were children, 9 years old. The Tennessee State Legislature, the following Thursday, did not acknowledge 7,000 people who showed up to our Capitol saying, we want change. We want you to do something. In fact, they had one person speak about gun violence, one representative. Then they cut off all communication about it during what's called welcoming and honoring, a period where we would be able to say to the protesters, we're with you, to say to the community, we're going to fight for legislation. But instead of actually doing the work of ending gun violence, putting forward legislation, things that we need to have happen, they said, well, because you all got out of order, you broke rules of House decorum, you don't deserve to be here, despite the fact that our people sent us there. And so we got a problem going on in Tennessee, and it's not just limited to Tennessee.
Yeah,
exactly. It's not just limited to Tennessee. And this overreach and this abuse of power is going to continue in your Floridas, in your Texases, in your Mississippis.
Is it safe to call it fascism?
I don't know if I'll go so far as to call it fascism, as what I do know about it being anti-democratic and an abuse of power. The reality is, if you continue to erode democracy, you will reach a point where you will not have it. And we talk about and we try and hold up America and our constitutions and our beliefs and our values. It's like, this is what the rest of the world should be doing. They should be expelling people they disagree with.
So why were you expelled? That was the confusion that a lot of people had. They didn't know why you were expelled.
Yeah, the real reason why we were expelled was because of what we were talking about. You had us going up to the House floor when we weren't supposed to, right, in between bills. The House almost immediately went into recess. We stayed on the floor and we listened and we talked to hundreds of people who were in the rafters who were saying, can you all please ban assault weapons? Can you please pass red flag laws? Can you please pass gun storage laws? We're listening to the people in the rafters and we're telling them, we're going to fight with you, right? We're going to be with you. The expulsion papers, and you can look them up, House Resolution 63, say that everything we did during recess was disorderly, it was dishonorable, but it was because of the issue that we were talking about. Because you got folks, Tennessee Republicans, who are willing to sacrifice our communities, our children, for the National Rifle Association, for the Tennessee Firearm Association, and not address the issue. And so in response to us, they called the children and the teenagers, who were the predominant groups of protesters, insurrectionists. They called us, who were
Y'all
duly
are
elected.
insurrectionists, but not the people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? But unlike January 6th, nobody died. Unlike January 6th, people didn't show up with batons and pepper spray. Unlike January 6th, we didn't beat law enforcement. It was a peaceful protest against legislation and against a status quo that we know is disproportionately hurting black people in our communities. But it was in direct response to a mass shooting that had occurred. And their response to the mass shooting is expelling us, not addressing the issue.
Right, Mr. Pearson, but let's kind of just, because I want to make sure people are not confused on the actual thing that you were, and I agree that you had every right to protest, you had every right to speak up, but was it exactly for using the bullhorn on the floor and not being asked to be recognized? I just want to make sure that the listeners understand exactly what it is.
Oh, so that was part of it. They said we used a bullhorn, we hit the podium, we spoke out of turn.
We hit the podium.
We hit the podium, while we were talking, like slapping the podium as you were speaking. My colleague, that was one of the things that they said. You walked up and you disrupted House proceedings, were some of the language that they use. Just anything. Trumped up charges to justify this. But here's the interesting point: the last two times people were expelled, they had committed criminal acts.
Right, I get that, but let's go back just a little bit because I don't want to just brush over that. And again, I know that the last people were expelled committed criminal acts, and I think that this is definitely overreach. But I do want to ask, just in fairness,
yes, of course, explain
the reason why I guess you did not ask to be recognized. I just want to make sure it was there. Were they not allowing that to happen? Right. Was it what made you go out of turn to present this to the body instead of the normal procedure, just so people can understand?
Thank you for saying that. There is a culture of silencing and control at the State House. I've been there. I was there for over 2.5 months. I have raised my hand for dozens of bills, and the speaker can choose not to recognize me.
Really?
Right?
Did you do that in this case?
That day, I raised my hand for the period of welcoming and honoring. The speaker refused to recognize me. Every time a bill came up that I was going to speak on, I started with the sentence, "We need to do something about ending gun violence." The speaker said after the third time, "If you do that again, I will censor you for the rest of today's session." Right? So the opportunity to even be subversive in saying something, or to use the democratic process, which they tell us we're supposed to, they willed against us because the speaker is operating as some autocrat, right? As some dictator who decides whether or not democracy or debate is going to be allowed. And so from that silencing, I went out with the protesters to the galleries and outside of the chamber who were chanting and shouting and encouraging them, right, that we are going to fight for them. The speaker turned off my voting machine. Right, and told the chief clerk he's absent. Representative Jones, they're absent. Wow. This has never happened before, and folks have been there for 20, 30 years and never seen anything like it.
I think it's the afro, Justin. The afro scares the white people.
The afro, the pick, the fact that we are serious about what we're talking about. Right. Like we are responding to our people.
That's right.
My classmate Larry Thorne was murdered this year in January by gun violence.
Sorry to hear that.
I appreciate it. We're not just talking about school shootings. The implications in our community about the proliferation of weapons is having a real serious effect on our people, right? And so it was the opportunity to say his name on the State House floor we were not given because the Speaker of the House and the Republican Party don't want to talk about the real issues.
Yeah, Mr. Pearson, I think that's important that you reiterate that on all of your interviews because if we go straight to the the broader context of why they did it, opposed to you tried to do it the right way and did not have that opportunity. I think that lands, just for people just to understand, because we obviously understand the broader issue. But I think that showing that technical, that you did, try to go through the regular procedure and you were not recognized, because a lot of times that happens, especially when you're in a house that has a majority control, on the other side, you have to do things, to get attention, scream and yell and jump up and down, because you're simply not recognized. So thank you for explaining that, because I really wanted to make sure people knew the technical reason and how you did try to do it the right way. Your opposition says, well, you should have just done it the right way. And so you really landing that is important. Let me ask you something about our people, because you've mentioned our people a couple of times. You represent a district that's 60% Black. And I want to ask you, being honest, when I looked at the pictures and I saw the protesters, they were overwhelmingly white. Are you getting the support in your district from Black folk? And just to be clear, I think every color doesn't like to see babies shot and killed.
Right.
We certainly, I think there's a consensus, with that for sure. But since you mentioned your friend and gun violence and how it still affects the Black community as well, and a lot of people don't see those things overlapping, which they should. I want to know what type of support are you getting on the ground from your Black constituents,
Yes.
the 60% that you do reckon that you represent in your district, and how you not being their voice now is impactful?
And where is your district? Because I'm not from Tennessee. Charlamagne's not from Tennessee.
Yep.
So where is your district?
My district is southwest Memphis, all the way up to Millington, I'll say. So we're in Tennessee. We're in the southwest corner of Tennessee. So representing a good portion of Memphis and Millington is District 86, where Representative Dr. Barbara Cooper represented before she passed away, which is how I got elected during this special election. Look, the district that we are in is overwhelmingly supportive of the stances that we were taking, because we told the truth when we were running for office, that we were going to fight for justice for everybody and for our community. Nashville is predominantly white. Memphis, Shelby County is actually predominantly Black city in Tennessee. And Wednesday, when you see the pictures of that protest, you will see that reflected, I think, as well in the support that we are getting. But the reason that I believe we are getting overwhelming support from our community is the recognition that we need to do something about gun violence, and the recognition that this is anti-democratic. You are disenfranchising 78,000 people because you don't like what the folks elected us to say. This doesn't make sense, right?
They're not, pardon my language, they're not just shitting on you, they're shitting on the people who voted for you.
The people who voted for us, right? My god granddaddy, who has now passed away, this was the last time he voted, right? Was in our general election. He won't get a chance to come vote again, right? When they hold another special election, they are taking away the effort and the hard work, not only that candidates put in our families, like my fiance there, Oceane.
Who's Black, by the way. I'm gonna be honest with you. People online were saying you was a plant, right? And they feel like you were planted and you were put in position. And when I saw you walk in with a Black fiance, I was like, okay.
He's Black.
You can't have an afro and a Black fiance and not have a Black fiance.
Listen, rooted, very, very much rooted.
Yes,
very much rooted.
Yes.
And I thank my parents both for that, and my family for that grounding, and our community, who's saying we need folk who will stand tall amidst the oppression, right? It's not that the oppression is going to go away because of it, but we don't have to be silent. And that's what was so painful to hear colleagues saying they had been silenced for decades,
right?
Since 2008, since Republicans took. And as Oceane, my fiance said, she said, hold on, if y'all been silenced for this long, how could you be people's voice? And now in this moment, we have a serious opportunity as a community, as a diverse community, of both Black folk and white folk, rich folk and poor folk, to do what Heather McGhee calls building the solidarity dividend, because the status quo has not yet figured out what happens when you get the hip hop culture together with the Ivy League elites. And we on the same page about doing something for our communities, recognizing who's really being harmed and who's really being hurt. The people who trying to keep things the same, their brains don't know what to do right now. And our responsibility, our opportunity in District 86 in the state of Tennessee and in this country is to use this moment, which started in tragedy, right, with the tragedy at the school in Covenant in Nashville, to really catalyze this conversation in a way that's never happened before.
What I like that you're doing, man, and we haven't been talking that long, but I'm glad that you're still keeping it about the actual issue. Because a lot of times in these situations, people fall in love with the messenger and forget what the actual message is. So how do we keep people on message?
Yeah. You can follow us on all social media, join our mailing list, because all we're going to talk about are the issues. And we're going to hold these folks accountable for not doing it. Go look at the bills that they passed just this session in Tennessee General Assembly, and you'll see resolutions supporting gun rights, saying we need to do everything we can to tell people how important the Second Amendment is. You'll see bills that say we need to lower the age for people to be able to have a gun from 21 to 18. You'll see last session that they took away permitless carry. And so what happened? 2,000 plus cars got broken into in Memphis. Murders have been up 44%, mostly committed by young people, because we're not putting resources and money into violence prevention measures, but we're putting a whole lot of money into criminalizing folk and incarcerating them. Legislation has ramifications.
Let's talk about your 2A, because I think there's a misconception on people that, believe in the right to bear arms versus what you're fighting as far as gun reform is concerned. And I haven't heard a lot about, the difference between the two. So can you give us just briefly, what is it, that you're fighting for? Are you saying abolish all weapons and nobody should have a weapon? Do you support 2A? Is it the assault military style weapons? Give us, let us know where you stand on gun violence and how you see that.
Yeah, I have nothing against the Second Amendment and people's right to bear arms. That isn't what's at issue. What's at issue is people having weapons of war on streets. To walk into schools and to churches and killing people. Y'all know 10 people were killed in Charleston.
That's where I'm from. 9.
Right, 9 people were killed in Charleston. Right? We having more guns, and this is the solution that Republicans are offering. Well, let's put more security officers in schools. But that didn't save the church. Right? That wouldn't have helped Larry. So the problem is the guns are getting into the hands of the wrong people. And the reality is there are certain weapons that normal people shouldn't have access to.
I agree with that.
Especially 18-year-olds.
Especially 18-year-olds. And some folks say it's even 21-year-olds. There are some weapons that we don't need to allow people to have access to. And we have a responsibility to say none of us want to see or hear about dead children. Nobody wants to hear or see about their loved one or their classmate's funeral.
I'm pro
because
2A.
we don't do anything.
I'm definitely pro 2A, but I'm also pro common sense gun reform.
It's just common sense.
Yeah.
We're not asking, to your point, we're not asking for anything extreme. Let's take everybody's gun, nobody have a gun or anything like that. We're saying that there are better ways that we can do things.
Has the president reached out to you or the vice president?
Yes, we had a good conversation with President
What was that
Biden.
conversation like?
It was reinforcing that what the Tennessee 3, myself, Representative Johnson, Representative Jones did was right, and that the response of Republicans is anti-democratic. And it's also, we got an invitation to the White House to come and elevate this issue about gun violence and the laws that can be passed, that have even been passed in places like Florida, red flag laws that can have a national impact.
Don't you think President Biden should be doing more, though? Because it hurt my heart to hear him say that he's powerless and he can't do anything without Congress. We know that. But you got the largest bully pulpit in the world. How about call out some of those senators that we know get money from these gun lobbyists for their campaigns?
So to your point, there's a responsibility incumbent upon everybody who's an elected official to use their power, the power that they do have. And this is the same thing we say in the justice movement, right? Nobody is powerless. Right? People have been made to feel powerless. People have been ignored. People are not voiceless, but their voices have been ignored. And I think for the president, the vice president did come to Nashville the following day. Vice President Kamala Harris, we got to see her and talk with her, similarly reinforcing, but also she was holding the folks accountable too on the ground in the Capitol on this issue.
I didn't hear her call nobody out.
She did.
You know what I mean?
I thought she did.
I didn't hear. Who did she call out? I didn't hear her call anybody
She
out.
definitely called out the Republican leadership that's pushing this.
Like, that's easy to just say Republican leadership. Like, what is that? How about, like, call them by name?
Cameron Sexton.
Okay.
That's the leader of the House. Governor Bill Lee is the governor. William Lambert leads the Republican Party. Jeremy Faison is the caucus chairman. Mark White is in Shelby County, our county, and voted to expel myself and my colleague Justin Jones. Yeah, we do know. And to your point, it's something about that, right? We have to say their names because we need other folk to know who is it that we have a responsibility of holding accountable. And just similarly, we have the responsibility, just like we have the responsibility of speaking the names of those we lose, we have a responsibility of speaking the names of those who are perpetuating this harm.
That's right.
And so I appreciate that.
Representative Pearson, and I want to ask this. Do you or Mr. Jones or Ms. Johnson, do you represent any of those families that were slaughtered?
So none of us represent those families. Representative Freeman, it was in his district. Representative Jones is in the district next to his in Davidson County.
Okay, so speaking of calling out names, then where was Representative Freeman on the floor? He's a Democrat, right?
He is a Democrat. That is a good.
Why was he not on the floor?
I believe on that day he was actually excused from the session. But another point that I think you're making is, how do we build more solidarity with people who
that's not the point I'm making.
Believe?
No, that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is, why is Representative Freeman not on the floor? Was not on the floor. Why was he not on the floor prior to that? Does he plan to get on the floor and join you in this protest, since these are actually his the constituents that he represents? Because I'm all about calling out Republican leadership. I'm all about calling out Democrat leadership as well. And so when I see a representative that actually represents the constituents that were murdered. I want to know what's the problem with him stepping up and also being expelled and joining you in this protest.
I'll tell you this. I've spoken actually to Representative Freeman. He has some legislation that I think is going to be useful and get passed. But I'll tell you this, for Democrats, and I alluded to this before, for Democrats in particular, going along or within the institution as it has been set up has been the norm. Resisting the institution has not. In fact, we, myself, Representative Johnson, Representative Jones, have overwhelmingly heard of folks saying, like, you all probably should not have done that because of the risk. You can risk being expelled,
know that. And
right?
It's just as bad to me on the Republican side, though. So if we're going to say that Republicans are holding up progress, which they are, then we have to also be fair. You don't have to do it because those are your colleagues, so that's okay. I'll do it for you today. We also have to say that Democrat leadership as well is holding up progress, because if you and Mr. Jones and Ms. Johnson were willing to, be expelled and lose your seat, while somebody else who actually represents those who were slaughtered sits back and says nothing, then that's unacceptable. So I'll just go ahead and ask Mr. Freeman, are you going to join your brothers and sister in protest?
Wow.
Or is he going to continue to go along with the get along? Like that's an important question. Absolutely. I know that's your colleague, but I just think that needs to be out there. I always want to know, you actually represent these people and you're saying nothing at all.
That's a great point, Justin.
And if they,
I don't disagree with that point.
And if
it's a great point.
If they don't reinstate you, what's the plan?
Oh, we keep fighting. Before we ever ran for office, had any of these titles, we were actually fighting in environmental justice to stop 2 multi-billion-dollar corporations from building a pipeline through a black neighborhood of Boxtown and Westwood. Saved 1 million people's drinking water. Our community rose up. Again, the solidarity dividend. We got rich white people to realize that if you allow them to steal black people's land and build a pipeline, all of our water gets poisoned. Right? You showed the interconnectedness, and that if you hurt people who are already suffering, we all suffer. Ending gun violence is good for all of us, including our communities. And y'all know, like in our community, whether it be Nipsey Hussle or Young Dolph, right? Like, we experience gun violence in so many ways, but the attention that it gets has almost been desensitized. And people have to realize that the effects of their legislation is having significant consequences acutely on black communities and poor communities, but doing something to fix these problems benefits everybody, including their children.
How do we make the people of Memphis feel safe, right? I'm doing a show in Memphis, a car show, and the biggest thing people are scared of is safety.
Yeah.
They want to make sure they're safe. I've never had to hire this many security. So that just tells me that the people in Memphis actually just don't feel safe.
That's right.
This is not a rap performance. This is not a street performance. This is a family fun day. So how do we make the people of Memphis feel safe again?
Yeah. We have to put in real laws, policies, practices, and money into helping our communities. They passed a law after the chief of police, our chief of police, went to Nashville and said, please don't do this. If you do this, we're going to see an increase in murders. If you have permitless carry, you're going to see more kids breaking into cars and just to steal guns.
Yeah, of course.
2,000 plus cars have been broken into. Murders up 44% this year. Exactly the effect that we knew would happen if this Republican legislature passed this bad legislation is what happened. So there's a fight that has to happen politically. In the immediate term, we also need to think about, how do we have prevention? How do we, even if a 16-year-old kid has a gun, how do we get them to not use that? Right? Where do they need to be? What do they need to access? And the reality is, there's more work I have to do, research I have to do. Oceanae, she works at Center for Justice Innovation, and we're talking to her organization and others like Moms Demand Action. How do we invest hundreds of millions of dollars into prevention instead of only offering, as people said, thoughts and prayers, or praying for the person who's committing the act that God helps them? See, these false solutions are not going to get us to a safer community, because here's the reality: the gun's out there. They dare. It's enough guns for every person in America to have one, including the babies and children. It's enough gun. The guns are there. And so we're not going to be able to go and take everybody's gun back or anything like that. So how do you actually prevent gun violence from happening in the first place? And you got a lot of instances of people committing suicide. You got a lot of instances of kids accidentally shooting one another with guns. And so, okay, is there some gun storage things that we can do that might help us? Is there mental health services that we can offer to folks so that they don't believe that this is the last resort? It is going to take everything. But instead of focusing on what are the right solutions, the folks in the majority party in Tennessee and folks who are silently complicit alongside them are seeking to expel and have expelled myself and Representative Jones.
I want to go back to something Tez said when she was talking about, Freeman, because I always wonder about that. Do you feel like you're getting enough support from your own party?
Who's a white man? Who's a white man, by the way? I just want to throw that in there. He's a white man. So go ahead, Charlamagne.
Yeah, I wonder, do you feel like you're getting enough support from your own party? Because I wonder, what was the significance of Vice President Harris coming there other than a photo opportunity? Like, is she going to put some resources behind you, so you can campaign again? Like, what is it?
Yeah, so I thank you for raising this. One of the points that we did talk about with Vice President Harris was how do we build progressive leaders in the South? The fight for American democracy, the fight for Black liberation, the fight for really everybody's liberation is under attack and siege in the South. And so the place to resist is I mean this, it's in state houses in Mississippi, in Georgia, in Tennessee, in Alabama, in Florida, in Texas. The work is going to be there. And we're reading this book by Charles Blow talking about the devil you know, right? And so Vice President Harris, President Biden are not leaving the issue alone. And we have talked about, okay, how do we elevate the voices of those most impacted, the victims of gun violence, to help us to come up with solutions? And then how do we get more people who believe like we believe, who are willing to sacrifice like we're willing to sacrifice to get justice?
They are kind of leaving the issue alone, though. When you hear a president say he's powerless, I can't do anything but plead to Congress to do something. Yeah. That's kind of leaving the issue alone. That's kind of above me now.
I think one of the things, I'll say the things that he has done well in this part are the executive actions that he's been able to take. When it comes to Congress, though, which is right, it's the federal branch that he probably has more interaction with than the state. It is a question of why are the Republicans who are running the House and the Democrats who are running the Senate not taking this issue as seriously as they ought. Senator Chris Murphy, he has been supportive of us, but we need real legislation that does ban assault weapons, because the problem is if you leave it up to states, they will do the most extreme thing maybe to their base. But when it's the federal government, that's it. All of us have to abide by the same rules. And so I do believe him exercising political pressure on the Congress, telling them that they do need to act and putting energy and resources behind that is going to be really important here. As you said, I'm grateful for the call, grateful for the opportunity to come to the White House so that we can further talk about what do those actions look like in a deliberate fashion. Because it's hard when you see a grandmother come into your office, tell you about how her granddaughter was washing dishes and got shot. They didn't even know that it was a bullet wound that had done it until a police officer saw this small little hole through the glass of the window. And you see her and you talk to her. You don't have the same response as folks who are saying, y'all just need to shut up and be quiet or not allow you to speak.
And just because I just want to land this plane, because we're saying we don't have the same response. But again, Representative Freeman obviously does. And so I'm just going to be honest with you, brother. I have a real problem. It looks like 2 white people were saved from this. Miss Johnson was saved, and she said, she believes it was because of the color of her skin. Just for those listening, reiterating again, they tried to expel her. She was saved by 1 vote. So 1 white woman got saved. And also Representative Freeman, I keep pounding that in, who was also a white man who got saved. So I'm just going to be honest with you. I have a real problem when 2 brothers are sent out to be the spokespeople for constituents that are not even necessarily your constituents. Still a big issue, because I know it affects your issue. And like we always say, when America catches a cold, Black folks get pneumonia. But I have a real problem when Black people are sent out, and race is a key thing with this, because everything that you see is about 2 young Black men, 2 young Black men, 2 young Black men. But then when it's time to talk about policy and talk about how it affects us, it's everybody. And we're doing this for everybody. And so not only is your conversation about doing it for everybody, but you're literally sacrificing your entire career, you and Brother Jones, for everybody, while the white man is sitting on the side on the bench. And I have a real problem with that. And there's another white man that I want to bring up. This is the Breakfast Club. His name is Chris Murphy, who has raised $250,000, a U.S. senator in Connecticut. Has he gave you the bag, or are they going to transfer the money? We waiting on PayPal? Like what's happening with the bag?
Yeah, the bag's in our name. So we got that money is ours. It's in our account.
It's for you. Okay, good.
Yeah. So,
okay, good.
So Chris Murphy,
there's a lot of other organizations that are raising money off this as well. Is that also going to you, or what are we doing?
What I know confirmed is the Act Blue accounts in my name and Representative Jones' names, that goes immediately to our campaign accounts.
So this one's in your name with Connecticut Chris Murphy?
Murphy, yes.
He's giving that to you. That's not through a PAC or any other.
That's not through a PAC or anything. That
Taz just making sure.
Listen, guess who appreciated me? District 86.
I want to make sure. I want to make sure you get the money because I looked at the report, and I know Democrats, they don't spend the money on these state seats, and I'm very big in state and local.
That's the thing.
Is where Right.
The
this
money
is where the
does
power
not.
is. So,
that's right. I'm sorry.
It doesn't come to you. Like, I'm a big advocate in that. So that's why I wanted to make sure while you have this moment, while they're raising money and they're bringing all of this attention, the reality is in next week, 2 weeks after that, they're going to be on something else. So I would like to make sure that the Democrats are supporting you because you're going to have to run in the special election, in the general election. You're going to have to get out that vote. I've seen the numbers on how many people actually come to the polls.
Right.
So what are they going to do to make sure that you win your special election? Because you still have to run for this seat again, even if you're appointed interim. What are they going to do to make sure you actually get elected to be the voice, obviously not only for yourself, but obviously for Representative Freeman as well, since he's sitting on the sideline. I want to make sure that money is being directed to you because now you're going to have opposition. I think you ran against 6 or 7 people last time. It's probably going to be even more than that the next time. So we want to make sure Kamala Harris, VP Harris, Biden, all them, feel free to send the bag.
That's right.
So that you can have the support that you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Amen.
He said amen.
What you was about to say? You was about to say, now that's the thing.
The support in state houses is next to nothing. And American democracy is being decided in state houses across the country. And there are a lot of folks who are suffering because the people in state houses are passing laws that say you can't read books written by African-American authors, right? It's in state houses where we are seeing the regression of rights as it relates to abortion and maternal health care. And we know our maternal health rates are worse than everybody else's, right? It's in the state houses where the fight for what I believe is the future of America is happening. And a lot of attention gets paid to president, vice president. A lot of money goes to them. A lot of money goes to who's running for U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate. And all those are important. And I get those. But what I have witnessed and what I've seen is if you have people in positions of power in an institution undergirded by racism, undergirded by white supremacy, undergirded by patriarchy, the effect of that will be they will wield the Constitution to erode your democracy and disenfranchise your people. And they'll do it not just with the voter suppression laws. We got the voter ID laws. They closed the polling locations. But now by expelling the people who are advocating for you. Right.
Question, I know that they're doing a special meeting to determine whether you would be reinstated. If you are reinstated, would you take it?
Yes.
Or you feel like too much damage has been done?
No, I still want to serve District 86. Too many folks in Memphis and Millington and Shelby Forest and Harbortown, too many folks have already went out in the polls in a special election in the cold of winter and said, we want Justin for justice. I never wanted to be expelled. I wanted to serve. I was willing to risk whatever the consequences were. Didn't know they were expulsion, but whatever the consequences were, because I believe the fight to end gun violence, I believe the need to have our voices in these spaces matters. Right, but I've always wanted to serve District 86, and I would be honored to do it again. What's important to note, though, folks in Nashville don't want me back. And they've started to threaten Shelby County commissioners, saying, if you all reappoint him, we're not going to fund your $350 million sports stadium.
FedEx.
For the commissioners said that they would lose funding if you're appointed back to the seat.
Right. That's not a democracy. That's a mobocracy. That's a mob mentality from Nashville. I thought, they said the issue was you broke decorum, and we got punished for that in the most severe way possible and imaginable. We got expelled out of the state house. So now what is this about?
Well, that was another question I had this morning. I'm like, is this really the issue that they're upset about, or have they been looking for a reason to get you and the other Justin up out of there?
I believe it's the latter in a lot of ways. My first day, I wore a dashiki on the House floor to be sworn in.
And the afro?
And the afro.
And a black fiance? Whoa.
Yeah. All of that. And immediately got a terrible response from one of the representatives on the House floor. He used a black woman wrongly and said, well, she's the reason why we all wear suits and ties, things like this. And from really that moment on, another man, he said, we need to hang people from a tree as a part of capital punishment. I spoke up and said and honored all of the victims of lynching in Shelby County, which has the most lynchings of any place in Tennessee. And I was the youngest lawmaker in Shelby County. And it is coming up against the status quo is something that this institution does not react well to. And so I do believe they're using and wielding their control and abusing their power.
So, Representative Pearson, I do want to ask you this before you get out of here, because beyond the afro and the dashiki, and because they did that in Congress, tell me about your Black policy? That's important to me because you do represent 60% Black, so you have a majority Black district. So although I appreciate the for everybody, and I know. Representative Jones was singing. I saw him singing "We Shall Overcome" with the white folks, but I didn't like that. I'm just gonna tell you, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. But so I get the about everybody, and one of the things that Charlamagne and I we talk about this all the time. It was not too long ago we were talking, and Charlamagne was like, "How can how can people represent a Black district?" And one of the things that I'm saying is, well, it's these smaller seats that literally represent majority Black. So you can actually talk about Black stuff without, and I understand the everybody and. The holding hands and the kumbaya, but I really need something that I can take back with me to the Twitter world. Tell me about your Black policy, not about everybody and help everybody. You represent 60% Black. Tell me how your gun reform or whatever policy you're working on, do you support reparations? Some people said you didn't, and then others said you did. Like, give us a quick rundown specifically on Black people that you represent in your district.
Yeah, I am 100% pro-Black, and here's the reality that we got to talk about. When you do for Black folk, everybody does benefit.
Yeah, we know, but right? I'm gonna ask you about the Black policy.
So I am. I got you.
Want to know about your policy?
My policies. Exactly.
What's your
when you think about reparations, I'm 100% for reparations. I have been for a very long time. For cash, for credit, for check, for credit card, for trust fund. And I was on Bev Johnson, another member of the iHeartRadio community, in January, and I explained the reason why I'm for reparations isn't just because of the enslavement of Black people, because there are some people who say, well, you weren't enslaved, and then we have to walk through housing segregation, we got to walk through lynching, we got to walk through mass incarceration, which we're experiencing now. What about reparations for all of these harms that we have experienced all the way up into the present day?
Are you willing to put it on your website, though? Because it's not under your website on issues.
Yeah.
Are you willing to do that? Okay.
I'm willing to do that. It is not the issue that people in District 86 are saying is number one for them. Because to the point that was made earlier, they're definitely concerned about safety. They're concerned about crime. A lot of my population is also elderly. And so you'll see on the website, aging justice. There's not enough money in Social Security to actually help elders live out the rest of their lives in a meaningful way. So policies that we're putting forward have to do with people being able to grow old well, which not only include financial increases in money, but creating opportunities for them to gather and to have community. I live in the most polluted, one of the most polluted districts in the state. And so, God rest their souls, both my grandmothers have died of cancer, my grandmother Pearson, grandmother Gwen, and it was due to environmental racism, which disproportionately hurt Black people and poor people. So both my grandmothers lived in a community, this community I live in now, where there are 17 toxic release inventory facilities that are polluting our air, water, and our soil. And so the Black policy that I have, as you articulated it so well, is finding where there are the injustices in environment and education, dealing with gun violence and everything that we can do, putting the resources toward them, because it's indeed the majority of my district that's being impacted, but the effects of it continue to be on everybody. And what is important to note here is that for us to seek and to be a part of liberation, and this is really important, the people who do have the resources also have a responsibility. And so when I talk about white people's engagement and involvement, it is not to say I'm just concerned about what they think or what they feel. It's because I believe white people and people of privilege and power have a responsibility of choosing a social location with the people who are being marginalized, because they have our money and our resources, and they have a lot of what they have because of what we do not. And so I prioritize. But respectfully, Representative
Pearson, when they highlight you, though, as the Black man, see, that's the thing. They keep saying, you did this to a Black guy. You did this to the Black guy. Representative Johnson said, you were expelled because you were Black. So see, we got to be consistent. If we're going to push Black when it's time to say, hey, come rally around us. And I'm on your side. I'm just telling you, being very fair, about how this looks. When we're saying Black, 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 I got a dashiki, I got an afro, I'm Black and Black, blickety Black. And then we get to the policy and say everybody else, it disengages a lot of folks. And so when I look at people's issues on the website, you do mention Black when you talk about criminal justice justice reform. But when I look at the other, policies, you talk about Black with voting rights and criminal justice reform. So I would just like to see, and this is just something, for the toolbox, because I've also seen, brother, you've gotten a lot of accolades from a lot of Black organizations. Shout out to Tammy Sawyer in Memphis. She was defending your honor, with me in a 3-hour Twitter space. So I'm posing these questions to you because I want people to know more about you and what you do for Black people.
I want people to realize
wearing a dashiki and afro.
And I want people to realize in every issue that exists in our society, in our country, Black people's liberation must be prioritized.
That's right.
Right.
It's in every issue. And so forgive me if it doesn't say it in every issue, but any time that we are speaking about justice, that is inherently a Black issue. And it is important as well that it be said. And I understand that.
And I know the brother got to go too. I know he got a TV hit. I know he's supposed to leave at 11:15.
That's all right. I'm good.
You with your people.
Yeah, somebody's gonna pull me and tell me to go, or Ocean, make sure we don't miss our flight. But the thing is, it has to be a prioritization of Black people within issues. But it's everyone, and the thinking, right, for true liberation is that we have to not only prioritize in policy or even prioritize in what we speak, but it's to help other folks recognize that when you're talking about Black people, it is not to the exclusion of everyone else. And so
but it's also important to recognize you represent a majority Black district. I could understand that argument in a district that, is a little bit more diverse, but you literally represent 60% Black. So I'm not, I'm not trying to challenge you. I just, in love, people need to hear it.
No, I love that. I love that. And
it has to match the policy push has to match the optics, because if the national campaign is about doing this to young Black men, then that policy, needs to reflect young Black men besides in voting rights and criminal justice. That's all I'm saying. I know you're doing the work.
Well, the national policy, and here's the thing, the national policy is that you have a supermajority Republican legislature who, by partisan vote, expelled 2 Black men, put on expulsion, Representative Johnson, because we stood up against the NRA, because we stood up for an end to gun violence. The result is the expulsion of 2 Black men, but how we got here is part of the problem. And it's because we have an anti-democratic institution being run by people who are being funded by the National Rifle Association and the Tennessee Firearms Association.
Why can't people say that more? That's what pisses me off about this whole situation.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear more people say. We know why so many Republicans are against, gun reform.
Even though the majority of people want to see it. The majority of people want sensible, as you said, sensible gun reform. The majority of people want to live in communities that have clean air, clean water, and clean soil. The majority of people don't want to see suffering of other individual people. And the reality is they too often perpetuate the status quo to our detriment and to the detriment of their own people. And see, this is where a lot of folks who might be white and are suffering vote against their own interests. Because the people who are in position, particularly because they gerrymandered the districts to choose their voters instead of the voters choosing them, are perpetuating a really harmful status quo. And so I don't want the effect of which I am a part of an institution undergirded by white supremacy, racism, patriarchy to take the day, right? What I do want us to see is the result of who did get expelled, but why we got expelled and what issue we were getting expelled for, because they are very comfortable arguing about, well, I'm not racist, so that's not why I voted that way. But then go ask them, but why did you vote to lower the gun age in committee? Right? Why did you vote to have permitless carry after the majority Black city of Memphis came to you and told you that this was going to kill our people? Why did you do those things? Because if they can just talk about, or we allow them to only talk about our expulsion, which is the effect of us standing up for what we believe to be right and what I believe my majority Black district wants for me to do and wanted for me to do and would want for me to do again if we were being silenced. And I appreciate you elevating that earlier, despite the fact that we were trying to go through the normal means of being representatives. If we don't ensure that they have to be accountable to the issues,
I respect that so much.
They're going to be taken out.
Tez, no, we've been talking about this, for the past few days. I hate when people forget about the issue. I see everybody saying, "Oh, these guys are stars, and they've been propelled to stardom." Now, I don't care about that. I care about the issue.
That's right.
You know, and I've seen this before. We saw this, no disrespect, we saw this with Kaepernick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Kaepernick came out talking about a specific issue, which is police brutality. Then it turned into, well, he got kicked out of the NFL. He got blackballed from the NFL, and everybody started focusing on that. That's not the issue.
Right.
The issue is gun legislation.
Right. But they want and I understand. Trust me. I come from black folk. I'm a doctor in education. My dad is a black preacher. Prioritizing black liberation is so important. But for people who want to keep a status quo, and for the people who expelled us, they are really excited to just say, "I'm not a racist." Right. I didn't just expel Gloria Johnson because she was white. They really want to just talk about that, but they really don't want to talk about what was it that they said.
That's right.
That you expelled them for,
right.
that you wrote up expulsion papers about. What made y'all so uncomfortable with the 7,000 children and teenagers who came up here demanding gun legislation, that instead of doing that, you said, let's put more guns in school by hiring more security officers, but not addressing the issue. And so I am 100% supportive of my people, my black people, my ancestors, everybody who got us here. And I know that our responsibility in our work is not just to talk about the persecution and the harm, it's to really interrogate this institution that is built to get us these types of results. And this institution is flawed because of the issues that I just articulated. Go ahead.
One last question before you go. So I'm a veteran, so I am all about, laying it on the line, body on the line, literally, for a country I believe in. One thing that I keep...
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. One thing that I keep reminding folks is that even if this was a conservative and they were pushing something that somebody else didn't believe in, that you didn't believe in, you still, I would assume, I want to ask you, would you support somebody being expelled for, their voice? And that's the main thing. The main thing is people's voices were disenfranchised.
Yes.
And when we make it about the person, the politician, then people start arguing about you, well, was he this? Was he that? When we make it about the issue, then you're going to have 2A people say, well, he shouldn't be fighting gun violence. I believe that if we center it on the fact that 70,000 were all three of you, over 200,000 people's voice were removed. Yeah. I think that's a bipartisan thing that anybody should have a problem with, even if it's an issue that they disagree. So if this happened to a conservative, would you be in agreement that people should be expelled just because somebody doesn't like what they say?
Never.
Right.
And I've had conservative people come to me and be like, this is wrong on every single level. Right. This is the problem.
It means nothing if they don't say it publicly.
It means nothing if they don't say it publicly, and it means nothing if they don't do something about it. Stop electing people who would and are willing to remove folks' voices. Stop electing people who really don't care about democracy unless it's their issue, because the reality is this is a snake eating its tail. And the reality is y'all won't be in power and position forever. But if you do wrong against people, and I told this on the floor, I told a guy, I said, hurt people. Because he ranted off about how Democrats used to be in power and they wouldn't let us have any bills and they wouldn't let us talk on the floor and they wouldn't. I said, so you're gonna harm folk. You're gonna spit in the face of that Constitution that we swore an oath on, because you've been hurt by another political party. I would never vote to expel someone for breaking a house decorum rule because what they said is something I don't like. I don't like these people who say there should be no exceptions when someone gets raped or there's incest and they need an abortion. I don't like what they say when they say everybody needs access to an assault rifle. I don't like those things. But that does not mean that the people who elected you don't deserve to have you represent them in the way that you think they should. And it does not mean that I deserve in any way, shape, or form to be able to take your voice or your power away in a democratic process and setting. And so this is a part of the issue, that we're in an institution that is being and operating in an anti-democratic way. And folks, again, on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats outside of the chambers, have said the same thing. You can't take people's First Amendment and away because you believe there's some absolutism that doesn't even deserve a peaceful protest related to the Second Amendment in a country built on protest.
Yeah, thank you for
Justin,
that.
we appreciate you.
I appreciate y'all
this morning.
We appreciate you too, Justin. Thank you so much for allowing me to pull that stuff out. And I look forward to Representative Bob Freeman, the Democrat who actually represents those slaughtered, to speaking up. Keep us posted.
I agree.
Definitely.
I do want to ask you, do you think we live in a racist country, Justin?
Yes, we live in a country that is imbued with racism in each facet of our society. And the reality is it isn't going to be just how we tackle it or attack it in one place or this place or that place. It is systemic. And you all know Kimberly Crenshaw. She talks about this intersectionality. And so whether you look at our healthcare outcomes as it relates to maternal health and what I spoke about earlier as it relates to environmental injustice, the places that are most polluted also have the most poor people, also have the people with the worst health outcomes, also have the people with the worst educational outcomes. And then you say, oh, what happened with redlining? Where did those facilities end up? Why don't those folks have access to the necessary jobs that they need? And in our country that was built by the blood of enslaved African Americans, we have not been given access to the economic, the social, or the legal or political opportunities that we should have up until this point. Until America does the work of repenting for its consistent sins against its most disenfranchised people, until our country, our states, our city councils and county commissions do the work of putting resources behind investing in our communities in a holistic manner, we're going to continue to see inequitable outcomes in our communities. Now, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi says, there are people who say, well, I'm not racist. I don't do racist things and stuff like that. He says the argument isn't that. It's, are you doing anything anti-racist? Are you being actively engaged in anti-racist behavior? Because when they built the country and this Constitution that a lot of people love, Black folk were 3/5 of people.
That's right.
And so if that in your mind is absolute, then today we still wouldn't be people.
That's right.
There has to be change. There has to be progress. And we as a country have to be deliberate in how we make that change accessible to everybody, prioritizing those who've been harmed the most. And for Black folk in this country who were enslaved, for indigenous folks who genocide was committed against, we are harmed. And the solutions that have been offered to date have been next to none for our advancement. Affirmative action helps white women more than it helps anybody. Minority women-owned businesses disproportionately help white women whose husbands stopped being the CEO so that they could get contracts. Even in the city of Memphis, only 1% of the money coming into our businesses is going to Black-owned businesses. Contracts are not guaranteed to go to predominantly Black-owned or predominantly BIPOC-owned businesses. We've got some real structural issues that we have to address. And expelling the voices of the communities, disenfranchising the voices of our communities who want for us to do that justice work is wrong. And so I believe that our country has a whole lot more work to do. And I still remain optimistic because despite all that we were not given, despite all that we do not have, despite the power that we've yet to tap into, we are still here. And we are still, in many ways, thriving in spite of those things and because of the relationships that we are building with one another. And so that's reason to have hope. And I think it is hope-giving to other communities who witness what our ancestors have done and did in order to build this country. I look at those pictures that you mentioned of these children and these teenagers who are predominantly white in the Capitol, but they are not creating a moment in and of themselves. It was Black children in Birmingham who marched in the children's march, quite literally bitten by dogs and things like that. And there's a song and a refrain that goes, I'm not gonna start singing, and my voice won't let me do it today. But I tried at church yesterday. But the song, it says, I'm gonna go even if my mother can't go, even if my father can't go, because see, the father and mother would have lost the job, and so the children went.
Ooh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so when I see children get suspended from school and things because they go march in a peaceful protest who are white, it is quite different than what we saw in the 1960s, but it's a part of a legacy that's been started by people who are seeking Black liberation. And I believe that is ultimately what is going to free us.
Well, Justin
Yeah, and
Pearson,
some of those children need to go ahead and some of those children need to run for Bob's seat. I'm sorry, I'm really gonna be on Bob from this.
Yeah, we on Bob head.
You on Bob head.
Tell them how to donate to your campaign.
Yeah, again, you see the issues that we have on our website. Go to votejustinj.com. You can contribute, and also you can join our mailing list. Stay in touch and engage with us because we are part of a movement. And it is not just going to be a moment that comes and fades away. For us, we're going to stay engaged and on this because we know the effect that it has. We know the catalyst for it was the tragic death of 6 people in Nashville at the Covenant School. But that does not, again, in this day after resurrection, right, that does not have to be the end. And so as a part of that conversation, that work is building this movement to end gun violence, but also to do the work of justice in so many different issues and areas that impact Black folk and particularly poor folk in our communities.
All right. Well, it's Justin J. Pearson. We appreciate you for joining us,
Thank you for coming,
brother.
brother.
I appreciate y'all so much, and have me back sometime.
Anytime.
Anytime
All right.
you want to come on.
All right.
Just be your
God
bully
bless.
pulpit.
Appreciate it.
All right, it's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.
Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.